Well, Newzroom Africa's special focus on the plight of whistleblowers continues. Let's now speak to former National Lotteries Commission employee Mzukisi Makatse. Social activist is John Clarke, and the Whistleblower House's Aslam Mayat is part of this discussion as well. Gentlemen, to all of you, thank you very much for your time. Can I start with you, Mr. Makatse, and just quickly paint a brief picture of what may have happened to you when you told your employer back in 2017 that there might be something wrong with a 6 million rand grant that was about to be awarded. Did you have any clue about how your employer would react? Tell us what happened.
Okay, thank you, Polly, for having me. Just briefly, immediately I raised a flag about the irregularities that concerned the SAT project, which was about just over 6 million. Resistance started immediately from my immediate manager within the Eastern Cape at the time. And she tried her best to force me into actually, approving legally this payment. And I, blatantly refused because I was convinced that this was irregular and it would be not only wrong, but unlawful and illegal of me to give a legal payment approval to a project that I was aware that it had all the irregularities, glaring irregularities that should have been obvious to all concerned. And when I refused, she actually escalated the matter to the national officials to a point that the very next day of my refusal, I received a letter suspending me, in fact, intending to suspend me, but with the proviso that I needed to leave the office immediately and security had to be on tow to ensure that I was out of that office the very next morning of my refusal. And that letter was signed by the then former commissioner of the National Lotteries Commission, Thabang Mampane. It was quite a very shocking development given the fact that I had never met Mampane personally, and she was a national commissioner sitting at the national office, had no knowledge of my work, what I did, did not even get to want to understand as to what were the issues. Instead, she just signed a letter giving the authority to even the security guards to frog march me out of the office. And that was the last time, I set foot at the National Lotteries Commission, because my suspension eventually led to my dismissal even before the completion of the disciplinary hearing that I had been subjected to. That was the following year in 2018, February 12. I was given a letter terminating my services before all the other disciplinary processes had been completed. And that was the beginning of a long journey, of ensuring that not only the issues that I was raising around the 6 million rands that was to be paid to the Buyele Kaya Music Festival, but also other issues, and other irregular, monies that were to be paid. One had to work with other internal whistleblowers in making sure that we expose all of, the wrongdoings that were still taking place. And we worked quite closely, with the very prominent journalists, especially, the ground up journalists.
Yes.
And who assisted us quite a lot in ensuring that this is getting exposed, to ensure that, it gets to the public, it gets the attention of Parliament, it gets the attention even of the president, to a point that the president eventually signed a proclamation that sent the SIU inside the National Lotteries Commission to conduct an investigation, which everyone is now aware.
Yes.
Of all the findings. I think, in fact, the SIU is still continuing with the investigation. But what has been discovered thus far is something that is, quite ridiculous to even imagine that, you could be able to steal so much money that was intended, to help the most vulnerable in our society.
Exactly.
And that's really what transpired. And the kind of hardship that Simon is talking about, unfortunately, that's what all of us as whistleblowers go through. I mean, for years, you go through that kind of, emotional roller coaster, personal problems.
Yes.
As a result of
Let me come in for a moment, and I'm sorry to interrupt you because I've read your story. I've read your story. You are going to relate it the best way you know how as we go along. I don't want you to tell it all. Let's talk to John Clarke for a moment. John, you've heard Mzukisi's story. Is it all too familiar for many of the people like him?
Yes, it is, but in the familiarity, there's the commonality. I mean, you could just have a number of whistleblowers. I'm just here for decorative purposes, I think, because there's so many people that I've got to know. But at the same time, they're nervous about actually speaking out. I'm on a trip now going through the Eastern Cape, and I had a wonderful evening on Tuesday with Patricia Mashale. Here's another whistleblower. He's been vindicated. She was blowing the whistle on what happened in the police firearms unit in the Free State. She was charged with some ridiculous charges. She's now been acquitted. She's free. And she's now trying to get her life back on track. So my job, my role being a social worker is to actually provide mutual support and to connect them up. And now Mzu's telling me about this person that needs help and get hold of them. And so we're weaving a fabric, reweaving the fabric of South African society that we had in the 80s during the struggle years, where there was a strong social fabric that actually enabled to hold things together. Now we are busy reweaving that so that we can actually deal with the scourge of corruption and hopefully. And I do want to just honor you guys in the media. I mean, thank you, Xoli, for doing this. Because, I mean, you've given me so many opportunities to tell the stories. And I was talking to one of the other whistleblowers, Patrick Maduna, just today. And he said, John, that interview that we had together on Newzroom Afrika had such positive ramifications. Somebody picked up him and got hold of him. He's now helping him get some sort of income. So that's what we've got. We've got the media. So just heads up to you. But can I just say this? I'm rather perturbed that the National Lotteries Commission has yet to show any reparation, compensation, and restorative justice to Mzu and to Selokina, who was the other guy that Ray Joseph from Ground Up was able to use as sources. There were other whistleblowers as well, anonymously. We are still waiting. It's 7 years since he blew the whistle, and we have had a whole transformation of the lotteries. We've got a new board of directors with Reverend Dr. Barney Pachana as the head, somebody with great integrity, but we still have not had satisfaction from Mzu. So I want you to now just use this platform to basically hold their feet to the fire. I'm saying, sorry, even Barney's a friend of mine. I've known him for years. I know that Jody Scholz is a woman of great integrity. And maybe you need to have them on the program next time and just say, please explain why this institution is still dragging its feet to actually try and make sure that there's a good news story. Yeah. And that people like Mzu don't just get awards and accolades, but they actually get a job.
It is indeed going to be the effort that we try and do, John. You're absolutely correct. That is what we also have got to be doing, to try and go back to these employers. Let's talk to Aslam Mayat for a moment. Mr. Mayat, tell us about the work of Whistleblower House. What is it that you do, and how is it benefiting the whistleblowers? How is it helping, perhaps is a better word to use, whistleblowers?
Okay. Good evening to Mzu and John, my fellow panelists. Just a correction, I'm not from Whistleblower House, but from the Active Citizens Movement. We worked very closely with civil society organization and worked very closely in setting up, in getting the whistleblowers together. They were just all acting on their own without any support, and Active Citizens Movement came in and got them together, and now Cynthia Stimple is heading up Whistleblower House. Newzroom Afrika actually tried to get her on this program. She was not available, and she's asked me to fill in for her.
Yes.
So Whistleblower House is a support group. One of the early things that whistleblowers face was just the lack of, you're on your own. There's nobody thing. Now that they're together, they can give each other support, each other advice, pull together. So they don't only suffer death, they suffer loss of jobs. There's lawfare, which cripples them financially, emotionally. You'll get families breaking up, divorces, people committing suicide. It's only the death that makes the headlines. But I'll say a few things, and if I'm going on, you can always cut me in to give the others a chance. But, in June 2023, ACM participated in the National Anti-Corruption Advisory Council.
Yeah.
And the workshop. A year later, March 2024, we wrote to NACA and asked them that, look, we got concerns. There's been total silence. Nothing's happened. No response, not even an acknowledgement of the request that we made for an update. Ministers, the president reputedly talk of promises to protect whistleblowers. ACM submitted representations to the Zondo Commission, and Zondo Commission identified whistleblowers as the key to the fight against corruption. That matter was then handed to the Department of Justice. ACM submitted representations to the discussion document on whistleblowing reforms. Upon an inquiry over a year later, DOG, just listen to the reply that they've given us. At least they did reply. They said that they had not even made a presentation to the minister on the progress on the bill, which progress was dependent upon costing of that bill. And therefore, DOJ could not even state whether or not the bill was even part of the plans. That's the whistleblowing bill that we're all waiting for. The deadline for the budget is next month. And if the deadline is not missed, we can wait with no great expectations for the next 5-year budget. But apparently, there's no costing issue for the Bella bill, which the president is ready to sign. Presumably, Bella is far more critical to the survival of the state, the fight against state capture, the fight against the mafias running the country. It seems Bella bill has got the priority. I'll stop there because, let's give the others a chance.
My goodness. It's just depressing. So we're going to take a break, but when we return, I'd like for you to listen for a moment to what happened to Mzukisi as soon as he lost his job. You've heard about the stories of depression. Perhaps his is going to drive the point home. Prime, and if you're just joining us, we have a special focus. In fact, we have been running this special focus on the channel throughout the day, the protection of whistleblowers. With me in this conversation is former National Lotteries Commission employee Mzukisi Makatse, social activist John Clarke, and the organization that is run by Aslam Mayat is the Active Citizens Movement. Gentlemen, to all of you, thank you once again for staying on. Let's come to you, Mzukisi, because at the time of your dismissal at work, you were a young attorney, a young lawyer, who had just gotten employment at the National Lotteries Commission, and you thought you were simply doing your job of being just rigorous in your work, but you didn't know that this would lead to your firing. Tell us about your personal circumstances when you then get dismissed.
Yes, well, immediately after that dismissal, suddenly you are unable to, do the basics. You are unable to pay your kids, school fees. You are unable to pay, the house. You are unable to pay your car. The entire burden shifts to your partner. And you just spare a lot of, control in terms of depression. You get into so much debt after that you become this person who's always expecting letters of demand, judgments, this and this and that, and you are unable to support even your family at home.
Yeah.
That were actually dependent on you, your old mom, your old dad, your unemployed brothers. It becomes, something of a, vicious cycle.
Yeah.
Where you have to try to make everyone understand as to what had transpired. And some, they think that you are the one who are corrupt because, from the other side, the National Lotteries Commission management at the time, they would be sending out stories to the media about your integrity being compromised, about you having taken money or having, done this and that, all lies concocted so that your integrity professionally could be, compromised. So this sends you into, a very deep state of depression, and it really, sent one into a very serious depression. I was able, though, to dig deep, just to try and survive, just to make sure that you are there for your kids, just to make sure that you try and do the basics for your kids.
You talk about your kids, Mzukisi. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Yes.
You talk about your kids. At the time of this dismissal, my understanding is that you were engaged to be married with two young children. What happened to that family structure?
Man, it gets to be so disrupted. I mean, at the time there were two kids and one on the way, and the whole situation, our plans, our engagement, it all got so disrupted. I remember that I had to move out of the house at some stage. I was staying somewhere in a industrial area. There's an industrial area called West Bank. A friend of mine had a business that he was running there, and he had a security room that he had there. And I had to stay there for over a year, because problems, that arose at the time, the first one to kind of leave the family behind. I couldn't face my kids. I couldn't face my partner. She had to take a lot of, responsibility. And that naturally leads, to a lot of fights, to a lot of, disagreements, and to try and lessen the burden and lessen the, stress on the kids especially.
Yeah.
And I had to, kind of move out. So it really took its toll, on that relationship. It took its toll on the entire family structure that one, was busy building, and that continued for some time, and we'll be able to try and resolve these issues. But again, go back to square one, because the issues were still there. Your integrity had been tarnished. You are unable to get a job, because as you get to a job, one of the questions that they would ask you is what led to you leaving your last employer, and then you had to explain. And already you are on the negative side of the interviewer, so it really became a struggle.
Yeah.
But I must say that over the years, especially after the establishment of the Whistleblower House, one was able to get some assistance from the whistleblower house because they are really playing quite a very, very important role in trying to cushion, some of the difficulties that we're going through. John Clarke was there. He formed this whistleblower group where all of us are able to be part of that group and share our experiences, learn from each other's experiences, kind of try and emotionally support one another.
Yes.
So John has played quite a very, very, very important role emotionally in trying to support all of us in that group. I remember at some stage, I went to stay with him in Joburg for about 2 weeks. Just so that I could be closer and to John and get the kind of emotional assistance that one needed at the time.
So let's bring John back into the conversation. John, before we actually got into this conversation, we played that little insert of the former teacher in the Northwest, and he talks about medical and legal consequences. These are some of the personal struggles that no one else sees because you're now within your home and you have to deal with this the best way you know how while trying to get back on your feet. How difficult is it to help people such as Mzukisi?
Well, it's very difficult because it's a unique experience. And of course, people have difficulty relating to their family and their siblings and their others because they haven't gone through the experience. They're concerned for them. And often then with well-intentioned, often don't help. I mean, I've even had cases where people have gone to their priest or their pastor and their minister, and the natural instinct of a person is to protect them and to try and get them out of trouble. Whereas they say, well, I'm sorry, I've got to be true to myself and do this. So I'm looking to see how we can't, in that process of the psychosocial support systems, make sure that people actually have resilience. And I'm busy writing a piece at the moment which says, what does lead to resilience? And it's very much about social support systems and the solidarity that you have. And so that it doesn't become like a pity party where people get together and that's important to have that ventilation, but you need to have this sense of saying, okay, well, why are you doing this? And what was so wonderful, I mean, yesterday, to practically illustrate, I took him to see another person who'd come to me, who was in the depths of depression, who was facing retaliation. And to just hear him speak to her and tell her his story and talk about her finding meaning and purpose in what's happening. She then had to appear in court today on what I believe completely trumped up charges. And she had a confidence about her that she wouldn't have perhaps otherwise had. So I just want to honor and say, look, as much as things are bleak, and I just think of the fellow who shared with his story earlier, and I would want to say to folk, don't blow the whistle. Well, before you blow the whistle, come and speak to somebody that you can get into your confidence so that you can be prepared for it. Because, and one of the things Mzu said, he said, why am I telling this? He could have said it. He says, don't just think just because you're telling the truth, well, that therefore everything's going to be all right. It's a necessary condition that it's true, but it's not a sufficient condition. You need to also have psychosocial, emotional, physical, good legal support. And I want to go back to the media. You guys are doing an extraordinarily important job, to actually create this linkages and this awareness in the public at large to say, well, every person can do something. They can donate to Whistleblower House. They can give some support. I mean, because by the time they come to me, the lawyers have taken all their money. They don't have any resources, so they need to have support systems in place, even on a financial level, so they can stay the distance, because it's always going to be a much longer ordeal than people actually think it's going to be.
Aslam, you touched on the President Ramaphosa. You touched on him repeatedly assuring that work is underway to ensure that whistleblowers are supported. But where you completely sunk me is when you told of the so-called progress on the whistleblower bill. Please just repeat where we are as a country in putting this bill together, so that the president can sign it? And you made reference to the Bella Bill, which you say seems to be the priority right now.
Yeah, look, the current regime is set around the Labor Relations Act, which is a totally inappropriate mechanism for whistleblowing, because what happens is you've got to follow a priority of reporting, and your immediate reporting is to your superior. And that's where Mzu and everybody else is now being victimized, because those are the perpetrators of the problem in the first place. So we actually, Active Citizen Movement, of which I'm not the head, I'm just one of the EXCO members, suggested that you take it out of the LRA and put it like have a competition type of thing where your reporting is done to an independent body who can give you total anonymity, and you can present the case, and then they can develop it and bring it forward.
Yeah.
But as I say, the thing seems to have been stuck. You know, they say there's no money. I think Business Tech reported that 3 billion rand is used to protect our millionaire ministers. Now, if you add that to the government, provincial, municipal, university, all the officials who are given personal protection, there's never any shortage of money to protect them. And you got overseas trips and labor upgrades of houses. You know, the answer is, well, it falls within the ministerial handout book, my bad, handbook. You know, COVID opened the floodgates for looting. 3 years has passed since Babita, and you've had 6 people who were convicted, the assassins, but the masterminds, nowhere.
Yeah.
Recovery, you have things, 500,000 spent on 200 pairs of skinny jeans. You don't find any recovery of all these things. Nobody's held to account. Officials are not held to account. The SIU reports that this whole thing might be about 300 billion that was stolen.
Imagine.
You know, of course, as they say, a lot of people are scared to think because they lose jobs, and income and so on. So one can't blame them.
Yeah.
So that's why legislation has to be amended so that they're given protection. And so legislation is one thing. The other thing is financial support that they need, emotional support, and legal support. And all of that is missing. Whistleblower House is obviously playing its part, but you know, there's a lot more that needs to be done.
Okay.
And nothing happens. You've got the state advocate, SR revenue advocate who was attempted assassination. You've just had the recent one of the Transnet mistaken assassination.
Yeah.
It just there's really no end to it, and we don't see an urgency on the part of government to be able to address this at all.
Aslam, let's pause there. We have less than 5 minutes to conclude this conversation. For you, yes, it's been difficult, but there have been glimmers of hope here and there. My understanding is that you were recently a recipient of an award. It's called the International 2023 Blueprint Africa Whistleblowing Prize. And that's something to lift your spirits. But if someone came and asked you, was it all worth it, or what would make it be all worth it for you if you look back, what would you say?
Oh, yes. Well, definitely it was all worth it. And people that know me, they will confirm what I'm saying to you, that I will do it again, because that's how I've always been wired like that. I've always been a social activist since the age of 10 years. So I grew up within an environment of activism that would always challenge, the wrongdoings that are done, especially by the powers that be. So I am not a person that, wiggles quite easily. Yeah. I always stand by the truth, and the integrity of our state is always going to be challenged if it is unable to protect its most vulnerable. So you need to make sure that, the integrity of the state is protected by making sure that you protect those that are, most vulnerable. So as a person who had a long, history of working for government, I had this understanding, that you need to make sure that you have a state that protects its most vulnerable citizens.
All right.
So no official, who was higher than me was going to convince me otherwise. So I'm saying that is important to understand first. The second part is that we need to understand that this is a very systematic problem. It's not something that, happens, or mushrooms here and there. It's a systemic problem. Our state and how it is run, especially our government, it is run in such a way that those that have the powers are always going to suppress any official that wants to, come up with facts in challenging their authority.
And I want to agree
That's
with
how
you.
our state is shaped.
I want to agree with you.
We need to deal with that systemic problem first. It goes a long way. Our society has been demobilized for quite a long time after 1994.
Yeah.
It is unable to stand up to some of these things. You only see, some springs here and there of people looting instead of mobilizing, ensuring that we hold government to account. You have an ANC, also losing power as a result.
Apologies.
So it's quite,
I apologize for rushing you. Time is completely run out. John, along that vein of an ethical state, yes, what would you say to President Ramaphosa?
I would just want to say, an area where and just responding to Aslam's point about the appalling lack of commitment for the government to actually overhaul the Protected Disclosures Act, despite all their promises and commitment. However, civil society and through civil law, we have now got the mineral sands judgment, which was Constitutional Court ruled that slap suits were outlawed and that the space was widened for people to speak truth to power with less fear of retaliation. It seems like lawyers don't know that, because as things stand now, 2 other of the whistleblowers as part of our network are being subjected to legal reprisals against them, and they are using that mineral sands judgment. And I've now also been joined with them as being also a respondent in their case. So we've still got bullies out there going about abusing the law.
Yeah.
And it's now, we haven't yet got the legislation, but we have got a case law now that says you can't do this. And I'm very encouraged by that. And that was just through concerted action by civil society to say, no, this is a complete nullification of the Bill of Rights. So we've got a Bill of Rights, we've got to exercise it.
Aslam, I want to apologize to you, so I'm going to put you under extreme pressure. 30 seconds,
That's
please.
fine. Yeah, look, people like Mzu should be honored. Civil society groups need to get together, and they can only be effective if civil society treats people like Mzu and so on as heroes and comes to support the organized civil society organizations. It took OUTA to get Dudu Mayeni declared a delinquent director, and that's what needs to be done. But support from the public is needed. This is an important thing, and everybody's got to stand together. Thank you.
Gentlemen, to all of you, my sincere thanks for participating in this discussion. Thank you very much. Mzukisi, your story, I hope one day you are able to say, indeed, this was all worth it. And yeah, I know he has said it was all worth it, but yeah, if it were me, I don't know if I'd still be this strong.